favorite show for the loonies.
Welcome to another edition of Film Freaks Forever. We're your host. I'm Mark Jordan Legan.
And I'm Phoef Sutton.
And our audio engineer and musician extraordinaire, Dan Radlauer, is on the other side of the glass, like out of a bad virus movie. But he's safe out there, but not in here. That's because we got the bad mojo of creepy, evil ventriloquist dummies, don't we?
We do. We have the evil ventriloquist dummy movie genre.
Yes.
Isn't that right, Otto?
Oh.
Yes, that's right.
Otto, I don't like the way Otto's looking at me.
I'm going to kill you.
Wait a minute.
I can't pronounce the B's or P's. Yes. The ventriloquists have been a mainstay of performing for years. I mean, they're not that popular now. They're not.
No.
There's only like Jeff Dunham, I think, now. But it used to be when we were kids.
I swore we were never going to mention Jeff Dunham in any of our podcasts.
When we were kids, there was Waylon. What was it? Waylon.
There was Willie Tyler and Lester.
Yeah, Willie Tyler and Lester, and Waylon Flowers and Madam.
Very good.
Right.
Yes.
And all those, and of course, before our time, there was Charlie McCarthy, who was a huge.
Yes.
Edgar Bergen was a huge star on the ventriloquist on the radio, which is really odd.
Yes.
Because no one could see that he was not really a very good ventriloquist.
No, he laughed. Him and his dummies laughed all the way to the bank.
His lips moved quite a bit, but he did have two characters that were very popular: Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snurd, and
he helped create Candice Bergen.
And
one of the most beautiful women.
Their adopted half sister, Candice Bergen, not adopted, but
she felt like she was stepsister to the dummies.
I knew Candice because I work with her in Boston League, and she said he had a room in the house.
Yeah,
Charlie McCarthy had a room in her house that was for him. And
so that's why you'll understand that these stories are really based in truth.
Well, because I think the moment anybody saw a ventriloquist, they obviously thought he's kind of crazy. He's kind of a split personality.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, I'll go back in history here. The term ventriloquist it's Latin, and it means to speak from the stomach. And back in the ancient Greek days, they were called engastromyths, and they believed that they were demons that were speaking through the stomach and belching words through the host's mouth.
I did that last night, but not as a ventriloquist.
Well, and they were throughout the Middle Ages. They were thought to be necromancers, and the church said they would be regarded as a practice spawned by hell itself. And
put that on the poster.
Yeah. But then in the 1880s, they started becoming very popular in vaudeville.
Right.
And there are a few. I can't find who the first ventriloquist was. I find different ones, but basically, it became a very popular art form in the vaudeville era and the musical area of England.
Just another act. Here's a dog act. Here's dancers. Here's a comedian, and now here's a guy with this weird doll on his lap.
And he would tell jokes through the doll.
Hopefully.
And generally, throughout, they made a lot of movies about crazy ventriloquists.
Yes.
And their dummies. And in these movies, they have a bit of the act in all of them. And I gotta say, in all of them, they do the same jokes every time.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of splinter jokes. But, we love this subgenre.
Absolutely.
I guess we would consider this as a subgenre out of the horror market.
It's kind of about fear of dolls and a little bit of the uncanny valley because they look human, but they're not quite human, and you can't quite figure out what they are, so they're creepy.
Yeah, and now, as you will know, for those of you out there who listened to our first podcast, and by the way, we really appreciate it. All you listeners out there and all the 5-star reviews and nice reviews we got, we're really, really pleased, and thank you so much for your support. And if you keep it up, we'll make sure that an evil ventriloquist dummy doesn't come and haunt your dreams.
Or we'll make sure that it does.
Yeah, because by the way, after you hear some of these audio clips from these various films, you might have your dreams haunted by a ventriloquist dummy.
So let's begin with The Great Gabbo, 1929, the first film with a disturbed ventriloquist played by Erich von Stroheim and evil dummy, which was called
Otto.
Otto.
Yes.
Otto.
Yeah, this is a pre-code film, and it's got music and drama. Otto is creepy.
Otto is creepy.
If this is one of the first or the first, dummies in a movie. Oh boy! And now, of course, Eric von Stroheim, who plays the Great Gabbo. What a fascinating career. Quickly,
one of the great directors.
Yeah, he was born in Austria and made a lot of silent movies. And in fact, he was considered kind of a groundbreaking film director. And his movie Greed is considered a masterpiece.
It's one of the in the running for the best movie ever made.
Yes,
and also he's an actor. He was in Rules of the Game.
Yes, and of course as the loyal butler Max to Gloria Swanson in Sunset Boulevard.
And he was an autocrat, mean, vicious director. He was known as being a mean and vicious director who worked his people to death, and he brings all that to the Great Gabbo.
He really does.
He is the meanest ventriloquist. Now, this is not a horror movie. There's no murder in this. It's just a story about a really abusive relationship.
Yes.
But one of the things that he's abusive with is his dummy.
Yeah.
And he is the meanest person. It's based on a story by Ben Hecht. And
great writer.
Who was one of the patron saints of screenwriting. He wrote The Front Page and Notorious and more great movies that I can mention. And this was his first adapted thing. He didn't write the script, but he did it. He
wrote the short story in 1928, and they made this the very next year. Now, Phoef and I, we have confirmed this because we couldn't quite believe it. The short story was adapted for this movie by Hugh Herbert. Now,
Hugh Herbert was a comedian. At least there's a comedian by the name of Hugh Herbert, and evidently it's the same guy.
Yes, because we looked up Hugh Herbert, the comics credits, and this was on it.
Who was in probably in the running for my greatest movie ever made, The Octopus.
Yeah, well, we could do a whole podcast about
but
The Octopus.
He was a comedian who's basically his bit was going, hoo-hoo.
But so he influenced everybody from Daffy Duck to Curly Howard.
Because they all win hoo-hoo at various degrees of hoo-hooing.
So somehow this zany comic actor adapted Ben Hecht's short story, and this movie is a blast though. It's got musical numbers, it's got
bizarre musical numbers. It has a musical number in a spider's web.
Yeah.
Called, what is it? I'm in love with I'm in the web of love, I think is what it's called. And so there's two people in very uncomfortable tights in the middle of a spider's web. It's great. It's great. But throughout this whole thing, he is really, really mean to his assistant.
Yeah, Mary. He's really mean to Mary. And that's actually, the best part of this movie is Eric von Stroheim as the Great Gabbo being such a bastard.
And unlike most of these evil ventriloquist dummy movies, the dummy is actually the good guy. The dummy is his nice side.
Yes.
And he is a total bastard. And so his assistant kind of loves the dummy, but doesn't love him.
Right.
Which is, of course, the premise of the short story, too. And when she leaves, this is what she says.
Goodbye, Otto. I'm sorry to leave you, because you're the only thing about him that seems to have a soul. Even though you are only made of wood. And if you're as great as you think you are, why aren't you playing the real theaters? Doing better things?
You mind your own business and go as you said you would. I'll show you. I'll show them all whether I'm the Great Gabbo or not.
All right, Gabbo. But remember this. To get along, to succeed, forget yourself once in a while. Think of someone else. Give in sometime.
Those are very wise words.
And, she went to HR to complain, and they didn't care.
Yeah, this was before Me Too. But if it was the Me Too movement, this guy would be... Because this is a perfect... It's really a beautiful rendition of an abusive relationship.
Yeah, it really is. Now, the female assistant there, that's the actress Betty Compson. Yeah, she's pretty good in this film, but man, is she great as the tragic streetwalker May in Joseph von Sternberg's classic, The Docks of New York, which we've seen. And that is a terrific film. That was made in 1928. And Betty Compson was also nominated for an Oscar for Best Actress in The Barker, but she lost to that bitch Mary Pickford.
Damn.
For Coquette. And that was in 1928. So 1928, 1929, 1930, Betty Compson was really a top actress. She was really, really great. But so as we heard, she's had it. She leaves, and the Great Gabbo turns to discuss this situation with Otto.
His dummy.
Yes.
She thought I would coax her to stay.
Looks like she's gone this time. For good.
What do I care? Do I need her? No. Do I need anyone? No. She won't be far. She'll be back.
Not this time, Gabbo. I don't think so.
You don't think so? Did I ask you? What do you know about it?
And that is a conversation that Gabbo's having with Otto, his dummy, which is basically the premise of this whole episode.
Yeah, and
people talking with themselves, but not being aware of the fact that they're talking with themselves.
yes, and as Phoef already brought up, the fact that Erich von Stroheim is playing this type of guy, he basically burned all his bridges as a director. He literally was banned.
Yeah.
To work as a director because he would clash with studio bosses just like this. And then, as we mentioned, he was reduced to just working as a character actor, but he had quite a lot of success. This movie, though, later he becomes a big success. The Great Gabbo is a big success, and he'd go to the best restaurant in town, and he would sit at this table with plates and plates of fancy food, and Otto is sitting there with plates of food in front of him. And everyone else in the restaurant is going, oh, isn't he the cutest? And of course, he's not cute. He is like hideous looking. And everyone's obsessed with the Great Gabbo and Otto.
It's perhaps a publicity ploy he's putting out.
Right.
But maybe he really thinks Otto is another human being and he's talking with him. But occasionally he asks Otto, would you like to sing a song?
Yes. And so everyone in the restaurant is like, oh, please, Otto, sing a song. And we want to warn you ahead of time that, this could haunt your dreams.
Oh, anything for the ladies. Tell the leader I sing my lollipop song.
Play the lollipop song.
I've always been the gentle kind, kept my temper well. But there is something on my mind I simply have to tell. There may be certain ones who shout you're just a dumb half-wit. But my mind's made up about one thing, and this is it. Ooh, I'd rather suck on a lemon drop than to try my luck with lollipop. 'Cause I always drop my lollipop, and it gets all over icky.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. And they all find this charming and funny.
Oh, yes. When's Justin Timberlake going to do a cover of that?
I think that's a good suggestion. They should do that. They should do that.
Man. So that's the Great Gabbo.
That's the Great Gabbo. Then we had, obviously, Edgar Bergen made a number of movies.
Yes.
He made You Can't Cheat an Honest Man. Right. And he wasn't a crazy ventriloquist. Matter of fact, he even got the girl at the end of the movie. But they did have the idea that Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd were real people. Mortimer Snerd were real people. They acted like real people. So there was always this kind of, nobody could quite figure out what ventriloquists were.
Yes.
And but we have then Dead of Night in 1945.
Yes.
And this is one of our favorite movies, one of the great horror movies of
and an early horror anthology. From England.
Yes. One of the first horror, not the first horror anthology, but one of the first horror anthologies, and a very classy. It's not a sleazy type horror movie.
I think it came from Ealing Studios.
Yeah, so it's very classy, and they're there's a portmanteau with the story, and so it tells a number of different stories. But the last story is the kicker, and it's really it was the story in which the ventriloquist dummy genre got pushed to its logical extreme.
Yes.
Where the ventriloquist dummy is murderous and a killer.
Yeah, and the film Dead of Night is terrific. This is the best segment of it, and this is legendary. I mean, this is the one that Phoef and I remembered seeing as kids. I saw it late at night on TV one time.
And every ventriloquist dummy story after Dead of Night is basically a remake of Dead of Night.
Yeah, and it stars Sir Michael Redgrave as the ventriloquist, and but it's just absolutely chilling. He's brilliant in it. The acting's amazing. And
he didn't make very many movies. He was a big stage actor. He was along with
considered
John
one of the
Gielgud,
greatest.
Ralph Richardson, and Laurence Olivier. He was the greatest Shakespearean actors of his day.
In fact, the original Olivier stage production of Hamlet that everyone said was one of the greatest things to ever be done on stage. He was Laertes to Olivier's Hamlet.
And he made movies. They made Lady Vanishes,
Morning Becomes Electra,
The Innocents, Importance of Being Earnest. So the movies he made were really, 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 really great movies.
Yes.
But he didn't make very many movies. But he's so good in this movie.
Yes.
And he just appears to be fully possessed by this dummy. I want to bring up the fact that it was based on a short story, sort of based on a short story by Gerald Kirsch, who wrote Night in the City, the great Richard Widmark,
terrific noir
Jules
film.
Dassin noir film. But it had a great title, and I just want to read the title for you. It was The Extraordinarily Horrible Dummy. and that story was just a conversation between a man and a ventriloquist in which the ventriloquist imparts that he believes that the dummy is possessed by the soul of his father and is running his life.
Yes.
And John Barnes took that and pushed it to the level of real nightmare.
Yeah. And so, Redgrave is a very successful ventriloquist. He kind of plays high-end places. And a fellow ventriloquist comes backstage because he's fascinated. Like, how do you do that? Because he does various tricks in his act and everything. And so this first clip that we're going to play, the fellow ventriloquist has come backstage to try and talk shop with Michael Redgrave.
How in the heck could I team up with Hugo? He's yours, isn't he?
Yes, that's right. He's mine.
What kind of a heel do you think I am anyway, that I try to steal another guy's act?
Now, please don't misunderstand me. I don't distrust you. It's just that you don't know what Hugo is capable of.
Oh, I don't know about that. I've had a pretty good demonstration. Say, who runs this act anyway? This fella's almost human.
Did you say almost?
That's right. As if you got a mind of your own.
Maxwell, this fellow's as stupid as you are. Perhaps I'd better explain the position.
No. Key, if you don't mind, I'm rather tired.
Why, sure. I understand.
Ignore him, Sylvester. Just ignore him. I'm the one who gives orders round here. He's only...
Hugo, please.
I down you. Listen, my friend.
No.
Say, what kind of a routine is this anyway?
Go away, will you? Leave us alone. Go away. Get out of here.
Okay. I'm going. You ought to get your head examined. Good night.
Hey, my friend, don't leave me. Take me with you. Maxwell, let go of me. Hey, get me out of here.
Now, in that clip, Redgrave has his hand over the dummy's mouth, which is really freaking out the other ventriloquist.
Yes. Is that where the dummy bites him?
Yes.
Yeah, the dummy bites his hand, and his hand has a bite mark, and there's blood on it.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to wonder whether or not this is real or whether or not this guy is crazy.
Right.
And it never quite pushes you, never quite says for sure
it leaves
whether
it up
that
to
is.
you to decide.
Redgrave took this role really seriously, and he was coached by Peter Brogue, a popular ventriloquist on the British radio. And he said, I was playing a schizophrenic ventriloquist, and it was not an easy part. For one thing, the ventriloquist has to remember to keep his mouth open. I managed that all right, but I still wanted an entirely different voice, though my own, for the dummy. I asked a friend, Diana Graves, to help. I would speak the dummy's lines. She would copy me, following as closely as possible my inflection and timing. Then I would copy her, copying me. So that is Michael Redgrave as Hugo. But it's just he just has a entirely different personality.
No, it's an amazing performance. There's a scene in this movie where he gets upset with Hugo in front of an audience, and people gasp. I saw it in a revival house once, and people in the audience just gasped when this happened. And of course, Sir Michael Redgrave was the patriarch of the famous Redgrave acting family. His daughters were Lynn Redgrave and Vanessa Redgrave.
And his grandchildren were Natasha Richardson, Jolie Richardson, and Gemma Redgrave.
Yeah, so it's quite the family and a lot of talented people. He's amazing. Now, we're not going to give away actually, the heck with it. Like many people in show business.
We'll give spoilers, what the hell.
But like many people in show business, poor Redgrave ends up in the nut house at the end. And this is a little bit of how things turn out for him and Hugo.
Looks like I've been needing a new partner.
Hugo. You don't mean that. Okay, you're joking.
Like hell I am. I've my career to think of.
You wouldn't run out on me now. I don't believe it. You wouldn't do that to me.
Oh, wouldn't I? Wouldn't I? Wouldn't I?
Hugo, I wouldn't let you.
Can't stop me, Maxwell. You're finished. Finished.
Suppose I tell him the truth. Suppose I tell him that you made me do it.
Try it and see what happens. They'll put you in the madhouse. But not little Hugo. Oh, no. I'm going to team up with Sylvester. Maybe we'll come and visit you. You know. Private show for the loonies.
Oh, that is just so good. Oh. So good.
Yeah, so
good,
that's
so
Dead
good,
of
so
Night, 1945. Wow.
Yes.
And then with, the explosion of television, a lot of television shows, a lot of anthologies on television. Let's do some creepy ventriloquist dummy episodes.
And the anthology form was generally a half-hour form with Alfred Hitchcock Presents and The Twilight Zone.
Yes.
And the ventriloquist dummy really lends itself to the half-hour form because, there's not a lot you can do with it.
No.
But if you tell a short story, it can be very effective.
And if the dummy looks creepy. And they almost always do. Now, in this one, this is interesting because this is a little different.
This is And So Died Rabushenka by Ray Bradbury.
The great Ray Bradbury.
Ray Bradbury, of course, was obviously one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time, one of the greatest fiction writers of the 20th century.
Lived a very long time. I was lucky enough to meet him near the end. He was at an event where he read from his works and meet and greeted people.
I never met him. It's one of my main regrets. But he saw this Dead of Night and was very affected by it and wanted to tell his version of that story. He did a kind of a twist on it in which the ventriloquist dummy is a beautiful girl.
Yes.
A beautiful woman. He wrote it actually it began its life as a radio play in 1946. He submitted it to Suspense, and Mel Donnelly adapted it into a radio play, and it was pretty effective. It's pretty good. I've listened to it. It's pretty good. Then he published it as a short story in 1953 issue of the Saint Detective magazine, and then in 1956. It was adapted also by Mel Donnelly for the Alfred Hitchcock Presents first season.
Yes. This was episode 20 of the very first season of the terrific Alfred Hitchcock Presents TV.
Which is one of the best anthology series of all time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have that huge fan base that The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits have. Maybe because it was on for so damn long. It was on for 10 years if you include the Alfred Hitchcock Hour version of it. And some of them were good and some of them were bad, but the good ones were really, really good.
Well, and let's be honest, in the 50s, too, with Hitchcock already a hugely successful film director, some people thought he was kind of slumming it.
Yes,
to be doing television at the time.
And it was a very interesting idea that he had of a big name director trying to exploit television and
introducing it as the host. I mean, that's really how most of America really fell in love with him.
And he was really the first person. I mean, he was very early on in the idea of branding himself. I mean, I'm this portly, jovial guy who tells macabre stories.
Yes.
And that wonderful illustration at the beginning that he walked into, which was a self-portrait that he drew.
The profile.
And using the Dance of the Marionettes, the Funeral March of the Marionettes
as his theme music,
which Bernard Herrmann suggested as his theme music. It was great. Anyway, but this is a very, very, very good one.
Oh, it's terrific.
Claude Rains.
The great Claude Rains.
Claude Rains, obviously.
The Invisible Man.
The Invisible Man, The Adventures of Robin Hood, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Casablanca, on to Lawrence of Arabia.
Right.
He was he was nominated 4 times for Best Supporting Actor. He never won.
Yeah.
But he was one of the best villains of all time. And Notorious, my God, he's so great in that.
He's great in that.
When he was young, he had a stutter and a really, really strong Cockney accent, which matter of fact, his name was William Claude Rains, and everyone called him Willie Waynes because he had a speech impediment. So he worked really hard and developed one of the most beautiful voices ever. Oh. And so I think that, and he was kind of short. There were all kinds of reasons why he shouldn't have been a successful actor, but he was. He was very successful as a.
And again, his
actor.
Performance in this, I think it's one of his best performances. I mean, he just gives it his all. Now, the interesting thing is, so his gimmick is that he has this beautifully hand-carved female dummy. And someone is found murdered at the theater where he's performing, and they bring in a detective to try and find out what the heck happened. And this is another little interesting piece. The detective is played by a young Charles Bronson. And this is right around the time, 1956, where Bronson changed his last name. There are a few film and TV credits where it says Charles Buczynski. That was Bronson's birth name, and he went by it. And, listen, let's be honest. This was around the time of the McCarthy hearings, and his agent said to him, you know what, Buczynski, you sound like a communist, and let's change it. And he changed it to Charles Bronson, and boy, does that work.
Now, the idea behind this story is that the ventriloquist is in love with his dummy. His wife is terribly jealous of his dummy. His wife's having an affair with his manager and he's fine with that because he's in love with this dummy. It's the perfect woman that he has made.
I bought new wood. Beautiful, fine-grained wood. And then I began to carve, slowly and carefully. Make the little nostril so. Cut the thin black eyebrows round and high. Make the cheeks small hollows. At first I grew discouraged. How, after all, could a cold chunk of wood convey any idea of the exquisite features of Ileana?
Ileana being the woman that was his previous assistant who he either killed or chased off. It's kind of unclear. And Ryabichinska is the embodiment of that woman.
Yeah.
And in murdering this guy, Ryabichinska can't put up with the guilt anymore, and so she confesses to the police that he's killed her, and then she dies, and he can't summon her voice again, and it's very moving. It's very moving.
It's terrific, and if there are listeners out there who are Hitchcock fans have never really checked out the anthology series, we highly recommend it. The other thing that Hitchcock would do is he would hire really good directors to direct these episodes. And this particular episode, which is called And So Died Ryabichinska, was directed by Robert Stevenson. Now, this guy had an amazing career. He was a Brit. He directed a lot of movies in the 30s and 40s, including the classic 1943 version of Jane Eyre, starring Orson Welles and Joan Fontaine.
With a great score by Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah, and then in the 50s, though, Robert Stevenson got into directing a lot of television, everything from Gunsmoke to Zorro. But then Walt Disney discovered his work, and Stevenson became his go-to guy. In fact, Robert Stevenson is probably responsible for a lot of you crying like little babies because he directed Old Yeller in 1957. And then he directed Mary Poppins, and then after that, almost every live-action Disney film in the 50s and 60s was directed by Robert Stevenson. We're talking Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Absent-Minded Professor, the original Love Bug. It's just amazing. And yet he does such a good job with this episode.
A wonderful job.
And then we have another Alfred Hitchcock presents.
I just want to say also that this story was then done again on the Ray Bradbury Theater.
Yes.
In the early 80s with Alan Bates playing the ventriloquist dummy. And it's pretty good, too, although it's not as good.
No, Alan Bates is quite good because we watched it recently.
Yeah.
Alan Bates is quite good.
We watched it.
But it's not as good as the
the
1956
the
one.
1956 one is really the one to go to. And, then they did another one, which was a very strange story, called The Glass Eye.
A year later, 1957.
With... Jessica Tandy playing the lead, and she's wonderful, as a woman who becomes obsessed with, she's in the audience and she sees this handsome ventriloquist played by Tom Conway and his hideously deformed dummy. And she basically becomes a fan stalker to this guy.
Yes, a groupie.
She goes to him everywhere he goes on his tours and all that sort of thing. And finally... she confronts him, and she has an audience with him in his room, and it's a dark room, and he's not really sure that he wants to see her, but he's kind of wants to reach out to her, and she reaches out, and she realizes that the ventriloquist is the dummy, and the hideously malformed dummy is the real ventriloquist.
Yes,
and it's a great shock. And what's fascinating about it is that, she runs screaming from the room, and Billy Barty, who plays the ventriloquist, rips his mask off and is pounding on the table in anger and all that.
It's creepy.
But you realize, of course, that actually who's the real monster here? Who's the real villain here? This woman who runs screaming because a dwarf or a little person is actually the ventriloquist or the ventriloquist. It's a very, very complex story. It's a very complex story. And William Shatner is the narrator.
Yes.
And he does a wonderful job.
Yeah, that's called The Glass Eye. It's terrific. Well, obviously, though, we have a lot to get to, so we're going to keep the dummy rolling, so to speak. And we're going to go next to The Twilight Zone. Now, The Twilight Zone in 1962 did this episode, which I believe is just called The Dummy.
It's just called The Dummy, yes, by Rod Serling, and, from a story by Lee Polk, who never really wrote anything else, although he did become a producer. He produced the Anne of Green Gables PBS series that many of us remember fondly from the 1980s.
And it stars Cliff Robertson. I always liked him as an actor.
He's a terrific actor.
Yeah, he won a Best Actor Oscar in the late 60s for Charlie, but many millennials will know him as Uncle Ben in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films, but he's a terrific actor.
And like Michael Redgrave, he takes this very seriously. He actually was friends with Edgar Bergen, and so he studied ventriloquism, and he does a good job of being the voice of both the two dummies. He has Willie and Goofy Goggles.
Yeah, Goofy Goggles are the dumb. And we're going to play a very, very quick audio clip from this. You're going to hear a little bit of the act, and then we're going to hear the great Rod Serling introduce the episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're certainly glad to be here tonight. Speak for yourself, Turkey. That's Jerry.
Every dummy to his own taste.
Now, cut that out.
All right. Let go of the suit. I'm getting out of here.
Now, wait a minute now, Willie. Just stay right here. Mm-hmm. I mean it. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry if I said anything I I didn't mean it.
Oh, no?
No.
No?
No. Just tell me this, wise guy. You did admit that you were superstitious now, didn't you? Well, on occasion, yes. But you don't throw salt over your shoulders or cross your fingers or anything like that. No, I knock on wood. There, you did it again! Wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. I resign. From now on, I'm a single. As for you, you can turn in your lap.
You're watching a ventriloquist named Jerry Etherson, a voice thrower par excellence. His alter ego sitting atop his lap is a brass stick of kindling with a sobriquet Willie. In a moment, Mr. Etherson and his knotty pine partner will be booked into one of the out-of-the-way bistros, that small, dark, intimate place known as the Twilight Zone.
Oh,
I love those introductions.
I love Rod Serling.
This story, although it doesn't credit it, is obviously based on the Dead of Night story, and it's pretty much the same story. It even has the dummy biting his hand in it. It was directed by Abner Bieberman, who directed a lot of TV, but is really well known as a character actor in the 1940s. He was in His Girl Friday and The Leopard Man and Winchester 73. He was one of those Jewish actors, looked ethnic, so he always played Mexicans and Native Americans and such like that.
Yeah.
I really love the way this story justifies the madness of the ventriloquist as you know, he's insecure, he's an alcoholic, he's all these things that really make you believe that this guy has a split personality. It's really, really effective.
Yeah.
And at one point, the dummy says, you made me real. You poured words into my head. You moved my mouth. You stuck out my tongue. You jerk, you get it? You made me what I am today. It's just beautiful.
It is.
By the way, a little side note, one of the chorus girls is played by Edie Williams, who is Mrs. Russ Myers, who was in did a lot of pinups and was romantically involved with Mickey Cohen in later in life, and
wow.
After he retired from the rackets, of course. So there's a little bit of history in that.
Well, I'm sure the dummy told her to do it. But obviously, the folks at the Twilight Zone liked this story so much that about 2 seasons later, in season 5 of the Twilight Zone, they decided to sort of kind of do it again. This one's called Caesar and Me, and it stars Jackie Cooper as the ventriloquist.
And it was actually, they used the same dummy. They used the same prop as the same dummy. So I like to think that it's actually further adventures of that same dummy.
I like that some guy was told, go down to the props room and see if we still have the dummy.
But he does actually talk about his previous owner in this episode. So I like to think that this dummy is traveling from person to person, destroying their life
from
and
the
then
Twilight Zone to the Twilight Zone.
Yes,
I mean, it's
yes,
amazing. Yes. Jackie Cooper is really good in this, but he had a very long, successful career. In fact, he was the first child actor to receive an Oscar nomination. It was for Skippy in 1931. Cooper was 9 years old, and for almost 50 years, he held the record for the youngest person to ever receive an Oscar nomination until that son of a bitch, Justin Henry. For Kramer versus Kramer in 1979, he got a nomination and he was 8. But now, of course, Jackie Cooper starred in many of the Our Gang shorts. And in fact, he was famously the kid who always had the crush on Miss Crabtree, the teacher. And you can't blame him. Miss Crabtree was hot.
She was hot.
She was really hot. But, and of course, as an actor, he made 2 classic films with Wallace Beery, The Champ and Treasure Island.
Yeah.
And then he became he was a guest star on all the TV shows in the 60s and 70s.
Became
Columbo,
a big director
Rockford
also.
Files. And then as a successful TV director, he directed everything from MASH to The White Shadow to Cagney and Lacey. And then late in his life,
he played Perry White in Superman movies.
Yes,
right?
all the 70s Superman movies.
Yeah, the ones with Christopher Reeve. And
he's terrific.
He was the editor, and he was great.
He was always good.
He was great. And I believe he does the voice for the dummy. Although
he does.
Initially we thought, well, that's Mel Blanc. It's got to be Mel Blanc. But I believe it was him.
It was
him doing the voice. Now, this is an odd story because this is not a story about a performer. He doesn't really perform much in this.
No.
He mostly commits robberies and heists because his dummy talks him into it.
Yes.
And there's a little girl in his boarding house that he lives at who is just a horrible little girl. She's always saying, "You can't get a job," and all this stuff. And she shoots with her gun. She shoots darts at him, but they're like real darts. They're like puncture the wall.
Yeah, she's a little brat.
They're not Nerf darts.
No.
This is a dangerous little girl.
Yeah.
And at the end of the story, when Jackie Cooper has been taken away by the police for these robberies that the dummy talked him into committing.
Yes.
The little girl confronts the dummy and tries to speak with him.
Yes.
I know you think on him. You're a hip little kid. I like you.
I knew you talked. I knew it.
I want to ask you something. You're not happy living here with your crummy aunt, are you?
That's a stupid question.
You'd probably like to run away from this flea trap, wouldn't you?
I sure would.
Okay. It's you and me, kid. We're a team.
Is Mr. West going to jail?
Honey, he'll be gone a long time. I know where he's got the money hidden. We'll go to New York. I'll show you the bright lights.
But what about my aunt?
Honey, you still got those poison darts?
A little girl and a wooden doll. A lethal dummy in the shape of a man. But everybody knows dummies can't talk, unless, of course, they learn their vocabulary in the Twilight Zone.
Oh, that's an episode I want to see. The little girl and the dummy go to New York.
That's my problem with this episode is that it gets interesting right at the very end because the Jackie Cooper, he's kind of a loser and he just goes along with the dummy and one thing leads to another. But that ending, the little girl's going to murder her aunt. She's 7 years old. She's going to go to New York with a dummy and try to make it in the big city. I want to see that story.
You're gonna make it after all. With the dummy. And folks, like many podcasts, we have to pay the bills, don't we, Phoef?
We do.
And we're glad to do this. We're so thrilled that our sponsor for Film Freaks Forever is Final Draft. And Final Draft has been the #1 selling screenwriting application in the world for over 25 years. Final Draft automatically formats scripts to industry standards, allowing writers to do what they do best, tell stories. Final Draft is the professional's choice and the industry standard used by filmmakers such as Oscar winners James Cameron and Aaron Sorkin. Their newest release, Final Draft 10, offers great new features like the beat board and story map that help you build your story from the ground up. Final Draft also offers reader and writer apps for iPhone and iPad, making creativity truly portable. And Final Draft is happy to offer 30% off to listeners of this podcast. So just go to www.finaldraft.com and use code WBPodcast at checkout.
I've used Final Draft for years. I wrote Cheers episodes on Final Draft.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
It's really a great form. And
Now, since we've been talking about television episodes, mostly the Alfred Hitchcock Presents and Twilight Zone using ventriloquist dummies, just very, very quickly, we're going to take a little side note because speaking of Cheers, even in the comedy world, ventriloquist dummies could appear.
I had a flash. I was walking my dog, and I had a flash memory of a Cheers episode where Sam Malone was a sportscaster for a local TV station briefly, and he was trying new gimmicks every week. And one of the gimmicks he had a ventriloquist dummy. So there's a picture of Sam Malone with a Sam Malone ventriloquist dummy on it. How did the
Red Sox do?
And he's terrible, of course.
Yeah.
But it was wonderful because Ken Levine and David Isaacs wrote that one.
Yeah.
But I did have a brush with ventriloquist dummies myself.
And you showed me that picture. It's amazing. And then, of course, the fantastic comedy from the 70s, Soap, one of the leading characters was a ventriloquist and his dummy, and he was as crazy as the day was long, so they kept that going.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Speaking of comedy, you do a few voices yourself, don't you?
I do, as you have had to put up with throughout the years.
Mark Ligon recently has perfected a Jason Statham impression.
Yes, I have.
Mark Jordan Ligon, as Jason Statham, is now going to say, "Do you know what I mean?"
No, man.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
It was like he was in the room, wasn't it?
It was like he was in the room. It was really scary.
Okay, well, to keep the dummy rolling, so to speak, this is one of my favorites. From 1964, we're going back into the feature film world.
This is a feature film.
It's a British film.
It's kind of controversial because a lot of people think of it as a bad movie. But I don't think, because it was done on like Mystery Science Theater and all that. And it's...
They have slots to fill, so they get desperate and start to grab anything.
Because I think this movie is a pretty good movie.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm sorry. Within our circle of film freaks and fellow cinephiles, they love this movie. It is. It's incredibly eerie.
And it's called Devil Doll.
Yeah, now that's one of the things.
1964.
Because it's not to be confused with the classic Lionel Barrymore film with the exact same name, Devil Doll. That was made in 1939. That one involves miniaturized people and not evil ventriloquist dummies.
Now, I believe that, by the way, that in British music hall, the dummy that a ventriloquist used is called his doll.
They were always called dolls.
Ventriloquist doll.
Yeah.
So Devil Doll is basically, in America, it should have been called Devil Dummy, but that didn't have the same ring to it.
No. It's just one of the many differences between our countries. Like the way they say schedule.
Yeah, well.
So the hell with it.
Aluminium.
Devil Doll, Devil Dummy. But I think this film is criminally underrated.
It's very, very, very creepy. I mean, it's a little bit long. I mean, it would probably be better if it was an hour or a half an hour. But there's a lot to it, and it's very, very creepy and very scary. Yep. And again, like the Great Gabbo, in this, the ventriloquist is the evil one.
Yes.
And the doll is trying to get help.
Yes. Now, whether they meant it as a tip of the cap to Dead of Night, the dummy's name is Hugo, which is what the dummy's name was in Dead of Night.
They probably did.
Yes. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hear a little bit of their act. So here is Hugo. And by the way, the lead actor is Bryant Halliday, and I think he's terrific in this too.
He is. He's very good. He didn't act a lot. He actually was one of the founding producers of Janus Films, which was released all the art house movies.
Yes.
When we were kids and all that. You often see that at the beginning of a movie. Janus Films. And he founded that with another guy.
Yeah.
So he's a very important figure in film history. And it was written by George Barclay, who wrote Village of the Damned.
Oh, terrific.
And from a short story by Frederick E. Smith, who I've never really heard of, but evidently he wrote a well-known novel called 633 Squadron, I guess. I don't know. But it really deserves to be better known than it is.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to hear a little bit of Bryant Halliday as the ventriloquist and his dummy, Hugo.
Oh, it's an old ventriloquist trick. They're all doing it now. It's corny.
Perhaps we can show the audience a variation on the theme.
Give me some wine. I want some wine.
A dummy? Drinking wine? Don't be ridiculous.
I want some. Give it to me. I know what wine is. I've had wine before. I want some wine. Why shouldn't I have some wine?
You are a dummy, Hugo.
That is creepy.
Yes, that's very, very, very creepy.
He also, I think we should add and share with the listeners, he's the only ventriloquist I know. He keeps Hugo in a cage.
Yes.
He keeps him locked up in a cage. He doesn't have the little carrying case that you always see in the other ones. And that's very disturbing. And, their relationship. In fact, just hearing Bryant Halliday talk to Hugo, we have another clip, too, to just show you what kind of act this was.
You know you frightened the ladies. You must apologize. Tell them you're sorry.
I am sorry. ladies and gentlemen.
And me? Yes, say it.
I am sorry.
Master.
Master.
So you kind of get the feeling that there is a very odd relationship between this dummy and this man.
Yeah, not a lot of jokes.
Not a lot of jokes. You basically begin to suspect that there is a real human being trapped within that dummy.
Yes, maybe that's why he keeps him locked in a cage. And there is a scene where, like, others around this act start to suspect the same thing. And I believe an individual gets backstage and is trying to talk to Hugo. And Hugo, this is the line.
What I remember is that the guy is sleeping, and Hugo walks into the room.
Oh, that's
as a very, they have a little person
or a child
in a costume, and he walks into the room. The guy doesn't know whether he's dreaming or not.
Right.
And the doll appears and speaks these words.
Help me. Find me. In Berlin, 1948. Find me. In Berlin.
Hugo.
Those words, help me, find me in Berlin, 1948, are just burned into my memory and to give me nightmares as a kid.
Yeah, and the movements. I mean, as we said, like it's very effective. Like I think he literally opens the cage and walks out, and yet there's this dead-eyed mask on this individual as it moves out of the room. It really scared us. It really, really did. And again, like Phoef, I saw it as a kid. And then when we were having one of our regular movie nights, this wonderful video store in West LA, Cinephile, had a copy, and I brought it, and Phoef and I immediately remembered everything about it as we were watching it.
Yes. Really, really a frightening film, I think. And obviously there's more to this dummy than meets the eye.
And one of the great things about DVDs is there are special features sometimes, and we were so happy that on the DVD we got our hands on, one of the special features is they have the U.S. trailer for Devil Doll, and we'd love to play that for you right now. So imagine you're in a movie theater in America, and it's the early 60s, and you like scary movies, and this comes up.
A wooden doll, strangely, terrifyingly human. Plaything of the devil, capable of such evil that only a cage can restrain its diabolical desires. It walks. It talks.
In Berlin, 1948. Find me.
It sees. It kills on blood-chilling command by thought control.
Hugo, she said you were ugly. But somehow he's put a man's life into that doll.
Somehow, the malevolent mystery of the Devil Doll must be solved before more lives are lost to the monstrous power that manipulates it.
Look into it. So deep and rich and red and warm.
He's calling me, Mom. Please make him stop.
But there are no obvious answers, no mechanical tricks, nothing but sheer horror that grows and grows and explodes into violent, murderous action. You'll learn the dummy's sinister secret only at the very end of this most unusual suspense thriller. But for maximum shock, see it from the beginning. Devil Dog.
Wow.
That's good. A good warning.
But maximum shock.
Stock shock or whatever.
No, shock sock is what he said.
Yeah, okay. Well, I was too afraid to listen. That was wonderful.
And taking a little bit from the Psycho ad campaign, you must see it from the beginning. This is about 4 years after Psycho, but oh my goodness.
Yeah, speaking of Psycho, there was one other Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Alfred Hitchcock Hour, that was a ventriloquist dummy story that I haven't been able to find, but I remember the short story. It was by Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho.
Oh, wow.
And it was called The Final Performance, and it has the best twist ending of any ventriloquist dummy story. I won't give it away, but if anyone can find it, it's in Robert Bloch's 1961 collection, Blood Runs Cold, and it's called The Final Performance, and it's a great story, and it was directed by John Brom.
Well, we have to find that.
Yeah, the Alfred Hitchcock Hour is not out on video in this country anyway.
If somebody out there listening has any kind of control over that, please release Alfred Hitchcock
And I've never
Hour.
seen the Alfred Hitchcock Hour version of it. I can't believe they used the same ending because it's so gory.
I hope they used a new dummy.
They must have. Yes.
Well, now we're going to roll on to, when we mentioned kind of this subgenre, evil ventriloquist dummy movies, and we mentioned to some of our friends that this is what we were going to do.
Everybody said,
oh, you're going to do magic?
You got to do magic. You're going to do magic?
Yeah. What about magic? And, okay, so 1978. Now, the interesting thing about magic, it was written by William Goldman, who is an amazing writer. He's one of my favorite writers.
At the beginning, I said that Ben Hecht was the patron saint of screenwriters. William Goldman is the second patron saint. He's one of the greatest screenwriters of all time.
Absolutely. Oscar winner, All the President's Men.
All the President's Men, A Bridge Too Far, The Princess Bride.
Yes. Now, when I was a young lad, I actually first discovered him as a novelist because he was a very, very, very successful novelist. In fact, wait, here's our connection. William Goldman got his break to start writing movies because of Cliff Robertson.
There you go.
Cliff Robertson read one of William Goldman's early novels and hired him to adapt a screenplay, which never got made, but then Goldman learned how to write screenplays, and then he was obsessed with writing screenplays after that. But so I was reading every novel that came out throughout the years in the late 60s, early 70s by Goldman. And, of course, Marathon Man, another good movie by him. That was a novel first. I read that. So I read Magic as a novel when it came out. I think it came out in 76. And I devoured it, and I loved it, and I couldn't wait for this movie. Now, it's funny, because Phoef and I went down the rabbit hole and watched all of these pretty much all at once, back to back to back to back to back. Once we finally got to Magic, there are things in it that work. But it's clunky.
And it's long, and it doesn't really have any surprises. Now, the book had a wonderful surprise.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, it's told, it's a story of a magician, a performing magician, and it's told by his close friend and manager, they call him, Fats.
Yes.
And you're a good halfway through the book before you realize that the story is being told by his dummy, by his ventriloquist, and it's being told. You're seeing it through the dummy's eyes as he's watching and concerned about this guy going crazy.
Yes.
And that's a great gimmick. That really makes it seem new again.
Yes. Now, of course, on the page, it's easier to pull that off.
If you do it, there's no way to do that in a movie.
Right.
So the problem with the movie is that it's just a story of a crazy ventriloquist, and that's better off told in a half an hour or 20 minutes, like Dead of Night or The Dummy or the Alfred Hitchcock ones. And it gets a bit long.
It does. It's ultimately, in my opinion, unsatisfying. Now, Anthony Hopkins, this is 1978. For a lot of Americans, this was kind of one of the first things they saw him in, at least in a feature film. Hopkins had already come over and wowed people in the 70s with a lot of the TV miniseries, which were popular at the time. He is brilliant in QB7.
And in the Lindbergh
kidnapping.
He
plays Bruno Hoffman, and that's just it. So people were like, who the
first
heck
thing
is this guy?
I saw him in was a BBC production of War and Peace, miniseries of War and Peace, where he played Pierre Besuchoff, and he was wonderful. And of course, the actual first thing most people saw him in was Lion in Winter, where he's incredibly young.
And he's one of the sons, and he's fantastic in that. But this, like a big major motion picture starring Anthony Hopkins. And by the way, he is terrific in it. It's funny. The problem really is with the script, and William Goldman himself adapted it.
Yeah, because there's no way. The gimmick of the book was so strong, there's no way to do that. And interestingly enough, with The Princess Bride, he figured out how to do it. Because in The Princess Bride, the conceit of it is that it's an abridged version of a much longer book that he read when he was a kid.
Yes.
And he's presenting it to you.
Right.
And in the movie, they had the Peter Falk character reading it to the little boy, and that was a beautiful way of getting that across.
That was a great wraparound.
Beautiful way of getting that across. But he doesn't find that so that it's basically just you know that this guy's a crazy. You know his dummy's gonna make him kill people.
Yeah.
And you're just waiting for it to happen. It was directed by Richard Attenborough, who's a great actor. In Which We Serve, Brighton Rock. Of course, a lot of people remember him as from Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Now the problem with Sir Richard Attenborough is, I agree with you. I think he was. I think he was a brilliant actor. He was a much better actor than he was a film director.
He was a brilliant actor and a good director. He directed some good movies. He did A Bridge Too Far, very good movie.
Yeah. Well,
Gandhi, very good movie.
Yes. Well, he followed this. He followed Magic with his Oscar winner Gandhi.
Yeah.
Now, I personally love Young Winston, which he directed.
Yeah.
And he also directed Shadowlands with Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, which
and
is a very good movie.
I love that film.
But he also did Chaplin, which is kind of...
he did Chorus Line.
He did Chorus Line.
So he made a lot of bad movies. But as Phoef was saying, I actually find him to be a tremendous actor. The Great Escape he's also in, Flight of the Phoenix, The Sand Pebbles. And actually, for our film freaks out there, he is absolutely mesmerizing in a very underrated crime film called 10 Rillington Place.
Oh, yes.
Now, and we'll feature that down the line because we want to do a podcast down the line on great but rarely seen serial killer films. But that is a true story. It's a British serial killer film, but you can't believe it's Sir Richard Attenborough. He is amazing in that.
But he also plays a good young thuggish criminal in a movie called Brighton Rock when he's very young.
Yes.
So he had a great career. His brother, David Attenborough of Planet Earth.
One of the greatest narrators of all time.
Nature documentaries.
Yeah.
How'd you like that for a family?
Yeah, you sit around the table. What are you up to? Oh, I just finished recording, Planet Earth, and he just won another Academy Award.
I hope there wasn't a third brother. I hope there wasn't a third brother who didn't do anything.
Charlie Attenborough.
Yeah, oh man.
How's the bait and tackle shot?
It's fine. It's fine.
I'm gonna kill myself. But again, I get it. If you were a young person and Magic came out and you had not seen any other evil ventriloquist dummy movies, let's be honest. These things are effective.
One of the odd things about it is that every one of these things has acted like nobody's ever thought of this before.
Yes.
There isn't really I think there's maybe a Tales from the Crypt one. We didn't see every ventriloquist dummy movie that knows that, okay, you've seen a million ones of these, now we're going to do this. This is acting as if you've never seen this before.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of people had never seen it before, so it was kind of new to them.
Right. Now, one of the interesting side notes when you and I were watching it and we did our research, and we always wear our research lab coats when we're doing this. We have white research Film Freak Forever lab coats on. Mine's kind of itchy. I think I need to wash it. But initially, the great Oscar-winning director Norman Jewison was attached to direct it.
And wasn't Jack Nicholson going to play it?
Well, he wanted Jack Nicholson. And for whatever reason, Nicholson backed out.
But I think Nicholson might have been able to do it.
Yeah.
Because, he can play crazy pretty well.
Yes, he can. But so Nicholson backed out, then Jewison backed out, and then they hired Richard Attenborough. And Attenborough, this is interesting, he wanted Gene Wilder, which I actually think could have been fascinating.
But they didn't want a comic. They didn't want a comic, which is odd because he's playing a comic.
Yes, and so the producers said no way to Gene Wilder, and Richard Attenborough had already made 2 movies with Anthony Hopkins, and he suggested
A Bridge
Hopkins.
Too Far, in which Hopkins is great.
Yes, and again, Hopkins delivers a terrific performance. Anne Margaret is in it. She's even nude.
She's nude. You get to see Anne Margaret nude.
Yes,
so that's a lot. Burgess Meredith is in it. You don't get to see him nude, which is another plus.
No, but he shaved his head.
He did
because he wanted to try. He decided because he plays Corky. That's Anthony Hopkins' character. He plays Corky's agent, and he decided, I'm going to play him like Swifty Lazar. Swifty Lazar was a legendary agent in New York, and he had a shaved head, and he was little. So Burgess Meredith is well cast. And actually, this clip now from Magic is where Corky and Fats are in the middle of an argument. I mean, Hopkins is crazy as the day is long. So they're arguing. He's arguing with his dummy, and his agent has shown up to try and find him. And Burgess Meredith overhears all of this.
Corky, you do it so good. You're even better than the garbage man. Ah!
Hey, Ben. How do you like it? I think it's going to be terrific.
What's with gangrene? Blue Cross repossess your tongue?
Come on in, shut up. Come on in, Ben. I'll do the whole routine for you. How the hell did you ever find me? You're amazing.
I bet it was that kid cab driver. He must have called the office and found you.
Is that right? That's it? Yeah, I told him I was with William Morris. He looked like a hustler, so I gave him 100 to shut him up. How much did you give him to talk?
Doesn't matter.
Right, you're here. That's the main thing. That's it, right. Come on, grab yourself a seat and watch. Just remember that I haven't got this anywhere near performance level yet.
How long you been like this, kid?
What's also really frightening about this movie is that he's with William Morris.
That's the really terrifying thing.
They really get him at the end.
So, needless to say, Corky goes off and kills a bunch of people, and
does he do it? Does Fats do it? Who knows? Again, if you, as we said, if you've never seen any of these other things, you might enjoy Magic. There are really, really effective scenes, but it's kind of slow and clunky.
Yes. I mean, if you were only going to see one of these, Dead of Night is the one to see.
Yes.
Matter of fact, the whole movie is terrific.
Yes.
Great framing device, great acting. Yes. It's a stunning movie.
Yeah, and then all the Hitchcock and Twilight Zone ones we talked about are really, really enjoyable, and we are big fans of Devil Doll.
Right.
Those, and then to be honest, I have a soft spot for Otto and the Great Gabbo.
Well, that's the one that's the most like somebody who you really believe is an actual person who's that much of a son of a bitch and that crazy.
Yes. Now, again, as we were talking about, still one of the nice things about DVDs, and yes, folks, they're still out there. You know, I'm just going to say one thing. You know, everyone acts like, and listen, I use the streaming services too. You can find amazing things on streaming services. It is stunning what they don't have, though. And my point is that we're lucky enough to live in an area in the Los Angeles area near Phoef's house. He has a surviving video store that still does quite well, Videotech.
In South Pasadena.
And in West LA, we have Cinephile, which is amazing. That's where we find a lot of this
I had to go
stuff.
to North Hollywood to Eddie Brandt's Saturday Matinee to get the Great Gabbo.
That's
because
right.
There aren't many
it's
editions
hard
of
to
that
find.
out.
But when we got our hands on Magic, again, one of the other nice special features is they had some of the TV spots and they had some of the radio spots. And we talked about this in our previous podcast. We loved that still back in the day, and you know, mostly in the 70s, but they would do radio spots. So you'd be driving in your car, and they'd put on a little quick 20, 30-second ad for a movie to usually scare you, especially if you had kids in the car, and get the kid to say, I want to see that. Please, can we go see that?
And this is one of the wonderful things about DVDs with extras and commentary and all that. If they have those, you can own them, you can possess them forever.
Yes.
Streaming, I don't know. I mean, you get on it and you get off it, and it's not really yours.
Did we sound like old timers?
We do.
Back in my day, you owned the movie, and it was on a disc, and you could use it as a coaster if you needed to. But no, you know what? I'm sorry. It is true, and I'm never going to give up my DVD collection. I'm so proud of it.
I have a Laserdisc collection.
Yeah,
How about that?
I still have Laserdisc too, but I hide them. But
And you have a lot of VHS, too.
Well,
right?
I certainly do. My God. I mean, how else are you going to get the magic Christmas tree but on VHS?
That's right.
But Phoef's DVD collection, when we go to his house to watch movies, it's impressive, and it surrounds us. It's literally all around the room in beautiful little bookcases and all that. But so that is just one of the things that's amazing about it. And by the way, we're gonna now play for you a radio spot that was played in 1978 to get people to come see magic.
So imagine that you're driving along, listening to the radio, and then this comes on.
Abracadabra, I sit on his knee. Presto, changeo, and now he is me. Hocus pocus, we take her to bed. Magic is fun. We're dead.
Joseph E. Levine presents Magic, a terrifying love story starring Anthony Hopkins and Anne Margaret. Rated R.
That's effective advertising.
And then you drive into a tree because you're so scared.
Yes.
No, that's very effective advertising. It's actually far better than the movie, I think. But that's just us.
Well, folks, we thank you so much for hanging in there and listening to us talk about this subgenre. Obviously, we love it. We think it's a very effective genre of the horror movie circuit.
And if you want to comment on, want to reach out to us, we're on Facebook.
Film Freaks Forever. Yes.
And we're on the Writer's Bone website.
Yes, and by the way, we have to give thanks and shower them with gratitude. First of all, our audio engineer and musician extraordinaire, Dan Radlauer, and of course, Daniel Ford and Sean Toohey, who are head of Writer's Bone, which is our sponsor. They're kind of our
network,
our surrogate parent.
Yes.
But Writer's Bone is a great website. Writer's Bone has an amazing podcast where they interview authors, and we're so proud to be part of their network. And yes, you can find us there. But again, we just want to thank you because you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, but at iTunes and Spotify and SoundCloud. But again, if you enjoy what we're doing and you have the time, it takes maybe 10-20 seconds, please go and give us 5-star ratings and give us a nice little review
on iTunes
if you so feel like it. And it really helps and it really makes a difference. And we cannot wait to come back next month with another edition of Film Freaks Forever.
That's right, Mark. We can't wait.
Your lips didn't move.
Isn't that amazing?
Put down that knife.
Oh.
Ow!
Looks like I'll be needing a new partner.